There is a moment, just before the first birds begin, when the world holds very still. The sky above the valley is not yet light. It is the particular blue of deep pre-dawn, a blue so dark it almost passes for black, except that somewhere along the eastern ridge, if you look carefully, there is the faintest suggestion of gray. The kind of gray that doesn't announce itself. It simply begins, quietly, without drama, the way most true things in this world begin. Here, in this valley, in a village of perhaps 30 or 40 households, nothing has moved yet. The lane between the houses is empty. The packed earth is cold and slightly damp from the night, and the smell of the air is clean in that particular way that only happens before people and fires wake together. There is wood smoke still, because there is always wood smoke here, thin threads of it rising from the banked fires inside each house, pale as ghost silk against the dark sky. Somewhere, a single rooster. Not the full chorus yet. Just one bird, uncertain, as if testing whether it is truly time. And it is time. Inside the nearest household, something stirs. Not dramatically. Not with any particular urgency. Just the small movements of a body waking in a familiar darkness, the rustling of rough cotton, the soft sound of bare feet finding the floor, the careful, practiced movements of someone who has done this same thing, in this same room, every morning of their life and does not need light to know where they are going. This is where our journey begins. Not in a palace. Not in a great city at the height of its power. Not in the halls of scholars or the courts of emperors. We begin here, on a cold packed earth floor, in a low-ceilinged house on the edge of a field, in the darkness just before dawn. This is the world of ordinary people. And it is, perhaps, the most real world that ancient China ever contained. If you find yourself drawn to journeys like this one, to the quiet corners of history, to the forgotten textures of lives lived long ago, you might find a home at Science All Station. We tell history slowly here, without hurry, the way it perhaps deserves to be told. You are welcome to subscribe, and come back with us another evening whenever the world feels like it needs a little quieting. Ancient China was, for most of its long history, a civilization built on the labor and daily rhythms of people whose names were never written down. The great texts remember the emperors, the generals, the philosophers, the astronomers. They remember the names of dynasties, the outcomes of battles, the exact wording of imperial decrees. What they record less carefully, if they record it at all, is the texture of ordinary life. The weight of a clay water jar carried up from the river. The particular smell of millet porridge in a cold room. The way a child's hands looked, already calloused, at the age of 7. And yet these ordinary lives were everything. They were the ground on which all the recorded history stood. Every palace was built by people who went home at night to houses like this one. Every Silk Road caravan was provisioned by farmers who had never traveled more than a few days from where they were born. Every great philosophical school was eventually fed by a bowl of grain grown in a field by someone whose name no one thought to ask. So let us ask. Let us come quietly into this house, and this village, and this life, and try to understand what it was really like to be an ordinary person inside one of the longest-lasting civilizations the world has ever known. The rooster sounds again, and now others join him. The sky over the ridge is growing lighter. The day is beginning, as it has always begun, in every village across this vast country, not with ceremony, but with movement. With the sound of a fire being coaxed from last night's embers. With the quiet weight of a family beginning its day. The household, rooms, walls, and the shape of a life. To understand the life of an ordinary person in ancient China, you must first understand the house. Not in an architectural sense, not its beams and its measurements, but in the deeper sense of what a house was and what it meant. Because for most ordinary people, the house was not simply where you slept. It was the entire world order made small and physical. It was a map of who you were, who you owed, and who was watching. The typical dwelling of a farming family was modest by almost any measure. The walls were often made of rammed earth, packed tight and smoothed, or sometimes of mud brick dried in the sun. In some regions, wattle and daub, or rough stone. In the south, bamboo. The roof lines were low. The floor was packed earth, smoothed by years of footfall until it was almost as hard as stone, and in cooler seasons it held the cold of the ground itself beneath your feet. There might be a raised sleeping platform, a kong, in the colder northern regions, hollow beneath, so that the heat from the cooking fire could be channeled through it, warming the surface through the night. In the south, sleeping arrangements were different, simpler, closer to the ground. There were few windows in the way we imagine them. Light came through small openings covered in oiled paper or thin cloth, enough to tell the time of day, not enough to feel generous. When the door was open, light flooded in. When it was closed against rain or cold, the interior was dim and close, smelling of bodies and grain and the faint sweetness of old smoke. The house was rarely just one room, but it was rarely many rooms either. There was typically a main hall, the central space where the family gathered, where the cooking fire or clay stove stood, where food was prepared and sometimes eaten, where visitors, if there were any, would be received. Opening off this, or behind it, were smaller spaces, a sleeping room, or perhaps two, divided by age and sex according to hierarchy. Grandparents near the warmest wall. Parents in the inner room. Children arranged by seniority in whatever space remained. And there, in the main hall or in its own appointed corner, always its own appointed corner, was the ancestral shrine. This deserves its own moment of attention, and we will return to it at length. But notice it now, as you enter. A low shelf or a small table, set against the wall with deliberate care. On it, perhaps a small clay figure, or a tablet with names brushed on it in careful characters. A shallow dish for offerings. The stub of an incense stick, cold now, but still faintly scented. This corner of the house was not decorative. It was structural. It held the family in place in time, connected backward to those who had come before, and forward, by obligation, to those not yet born. Beyond the main structure, there was often a small courtyard, walled or partially walled, where chickens moved and pecked, where a water jar stood near the door, where vegetables grew in tightly managed rows against the south-facing wall to catch the most light. Garlic, scallions, gourds in summer. Cabbages and radishes into autumn. Whatever the season allowed. The courtyard was not private space in any modern sense. Neighbors could hear everything through the walls, and in smaller villages the walls were sometimes shared. Life was semi-public in a way that is hard to imagine now. The sounds and smells of one household moved freely into the next. The tools of the family's work hung near the entrance or leaned against the outer wall. Hoes, sickles, carrying poles with their two baskets balanced on either end, the standard way of moving almost everything in this world, one shoulder at a time. Inside, near the stove, the cooking tools, clay pots of varying sizes, a wooden ladle, a rough stone for grinding grain, a woven bamboo strainer. On a beam overhead, bundles of dried herbs and perhaps a length of cured meat if the season had been good. Everywhere you looked, there was evidence of careful management. Nothing was wasted. Nothing was stored carelessly. Every object had a place, and the placement of objects in this world was never accidental. Where you put things reflected who you were, who had authority, what mattered. The grain jar occupied a position of special significance, near the back of the house, protected, perhaps wrapped in a little cloth or covered with a wooden lid with a smooth stone on top. Because the grain jar was not just storage. It was the future. It was the measure of whether the family would be all right. Look at the walls more carefully and you may see things written there, not written as decoration, but written as protection. A brush mark of red paste near the door frame. A small paper charm above the sleeping area. Characters that most people in this household could not read in any scholarly sense, but whose purpose was understood by everyone, to keep away illness, bad fortune, hungry spirits, the wrong kind of attention from invisible forces. This was a world that was watched, from all directions, at all times. The house said, "We belong here." The arrangement of its rooms said, "We know our order." The shrine in the corner said, "We remember where we came from." And the grain jar near the back wall said, quietly and without sentiment, "We are trying to survive." Outside, the light is growing stronger now. The village lane is beginning to show figures, a woman heading toward the well with a jar balanced on a yoke, a man tightening the lacing of his sandals in a doorway. The smell of the first cooking fires is becoming distinct, each household smoke carrying its own particular note of wood and grain. The bowl and the fire, food, grain, and the ritual of eating. If you were to travel across the breadth of ancient China, from the millet fields of the north to the rice paddies of the south, from the wheat regions of the central plains to the river valleys where water chestnuts grew in the shallows, the thing that would strike you, above all else, was how completely the rhythm of each day was organized around grain. Not around grain in the abstract sense of commodity or economy, though it was both of those things. Around grain in the most immediate, physical sense. The smell of it. The sound of it being measured from a jar. The weight of the full pot over the fire. The particular softness of cooked millet in a wooden bowl held in two hands on a cold morning. Grain was not merely food. It was the axis around which ordinary life rotated. Everything else, labor, marriage, taxation, social harmony, the favor of spirits, was in some way organized around whether the grain would last. In the northern regions, millet was the ancient staple, one of the oldest cultivated grains in this part of the world, hardy and capable of tolerating drought better than most. It cooked into a thick, pale porridge, filling, plain, nourishing in a basic way. In good seasons there might be enough grain to make steamed cakes or a kind of flat bread on a clay pan over the fire. Wheat, as it spread across the northern plains, eventually gave rise to noodles and dumplings, made with considerably more effort and care than the daily porridge, and therefore eaten with considerably more appreciation. In the South, rice was the world. Not the fluffy white rice of later centuries and modern tables, but older varieties, slower to cook, chewier, carrying more of the earth in their color and texture. Steamed in a clay pot with a fitted lid, its steam escaping in slow curls, rice announced itself through the whole household as it cooked. The smell of steaming rice is the smell of safety in those rooms. It means there will be a meal. Vegetables were whatever grew near the house or could be bought cheaply at the market. Radishes sliced thin. Salted cabbage, preserved through winter. Garlic and scallions added to nearly everything, both for flavor and, people believed firmly, for their strengthening and protective properties. Dried mushrooms soaked in water and simmered into broths. River plants and water greens gathered by women and children along the banks. Soybeans, fermented into paste or pressed for their liquid, what we might recognize as the ancestors of miso and soy sauce, were the salt and depth of ordinary cooking, adding the savory weight to dishes that had little else to make them interesting. Meat was rare. This point is important and easy to underestimate. For most ordinary families in most ordinary seasons, meat appeared perhaps at festivals, perhaps when an animal died unexpectedly and could be used before it spoiled, perhaps as a gift from a more prosperous neighbor. A chicken might be kept for eggs and only eaten when it had stopped laying. A pig, if a family had one, was an investment. It ate table scraps and transformed them into protein and fat and a portion of value that could be sold or traded. Fish, in regions with rivers or ponds nearby, was more common, and the smell of preserved, salted fish hung in many households like a background note in a particular kind of music. Salt itself was precious. Salt was, in various periods, controlled by the state. Imperial salt monopolies meant that the flavoring of food was entangled, always, with political power. A common family that ran out of salt before the next market day ate their food flat and knew, in the most literal way, that they existed at the bottom of a very large system. The cooking fire, a clay stove, typically, with one or two openings for pots, fed from below through a small door and vented through a flue to the outside, was the literal and metaphorical heart of the household. It was tended by the woman of the house, or by the eldest daughter-in-law if this was a multi-generation family. To tend the fire was not a minor domestic task. It was a daily negotiation with the most fundamental forces of survival: warmth, cooked food, the prevention of illness that came from raw or poorly prepared grain. The clay stove had its own god, a small deity resident in the stove itself, whose annual journey to report on the family's behavior to the heavens was marked by ceremony and ritual. Even the fire was watched. Meals were taken in sequence, not with elaborate ceremony, but with recognized order. The elder of the household ate first, or was served first, or was given the better portion, or the seat closest to the warmth. Children ate last, from what remained. This was not cruelty. It was hierarchy rendered domestic, the same ordering principle that governed every aspect of life here, applied to the simple question of who gets the bowl first. Silence, or something close to it, accompanied eating in many households. Not the performative, rule-bound silence of formal occasions, but the quiet that comes naturally when people are tired and the food is warm and there is nothing particular to say. A few words. A question about the field or the weather. The sound of a child's bowl being refilled. There was an art, too, even in plain cooking. The women who cooked well in these households were not unnoticed. The ability to make something palatable and filling from the same few ingredients, season after season, without waste, was a skill that was recognized, praised, and passed on. A woman who could balance the salty bean paste, judge the moment the grain was properly softened, time the brief flash of green scallion into the hot oil or fat, that woman held a kind of authority in the domestic world that existed alongside, and sometimes surpassed, any formal hierarchy. In times of genuine scarcity, the cooking adjusted further. Porridge made thin enough to be called soup. The broth of boiled grain stretched with water and foraged greens. The grain that remained measured carefully, divided into smaller portions, the jar consulted with increasing anxiety as the months wore on. But in a good season, in a harvest year when the grain jars were full and the preserved vegetables were plentiful, the morning meal held a simple and real pleasure. Steam from the pot. The warmth of a clay bowl between the palms. The particular satisfaction of being fed, and the particular knowledge that the family you were feeding was fed too. Labor under heaven, fields, looms, markets, and the work of ordinary hands. The ancient Chinese calendar was not simply a way of marking time. It was an instruction manual. It told you, month by month and sometimes week by week, what needed to be done. When to plow. When to sow when the silkworms needed feeding. When to harvest. When to repair the tools. When to offer prayers for rain. The year had a shape, and the shape was agricultural, and to live inside it was to understand time not as an abstract flow but as a succession of tasks. For men, the central task was the field. Most ordinary families farmed. This was the fundamental social and economic reality of ancient China across most of its history, a civilization built on peasant agriculture, on men and their families working small parcels of land through the full cycle of the year. The tools were simple: the wooden plow, increasingly equipped with iron in later periods, the hoe, used endlessly for weeding and breaking up soil, the sickle at harvest, the flail for threshing, the carrying pole for moving grain from field to home. The labor was continuous, and it was physical in a way that leaves its mark on the body permanently. Spring was the anxious season. The soil needed to be broken after winter's hardness. Seed grain, carefully kept from the previous harvest, stored in the driest corner, had to be planted at the right moment. Too early, and a late frost could kill it. Too late, and the growing season shortened toward danger. The farmer read the sky and the soil with the kind of fluency that comes only from generations of attention. He looked at cloud formations, at the behavior of birds, at the way the wind moved across the surface of standing water. He was, in his way, a scientist of the local world, even if neither he nor anyone around him would have used that word. Through summer, the fields required constant attention. Weeding was endless, performed mostly by the family, sometimes with neighboring families helping each other, in the informal cooperative arrangements that made village life function. Irrigation, where possible, was managed through community systems of channels and sluices, the maintenance of which was itself a form of collective labor and collective responsibility. A man who neglected his section of the channel damaged not only his own crop but his neighbors, and the social pressure of village life enforced maintenance more effectively than any written law. Harvest was the hinge of the year, the moment of arrival or disappointment, when months of work resolved into a yield that would either carry the family through to the next spring or would not quite do so, leaving a gap that anxiety would fill until something could be borrowed or traded. After harvest, in the weeks before winter fully closed in, there was repair. Tools fixed. Roofs rethatched or patched. Clay walls mended where summer rains had softened and cracked them. Wood gathered. Animals fed and sheltered. The long preparation for cold, which in the northern regions could be genuinely harsh, the wind blowing across the plains without interruption, the fields flat and brown and silent under frost. And then, in the depths of winter, a season of relative rest, or at least of different labor. Rope making. Mat weaving. Minor construction. Repairs of all the smaller objects of daily life. And always, in the winter evenings, the sound of the loom. Because while men worked the fields, women worked the cloth, and to say this plainly without pause risks underselling what it meant. Textile production in ancient China was not a side activity. It was an economic necessity equivalent in importance to agricultural production. A household that could not produce its own cloth, or enough cloth to trade, was a household in real difficulty. And the production of cloth, spinning thread from hemp or silk fiber, setting up and working the loom, cutting and stitching the resulting fabric into garments, was labor that occupied women for hours every day through most of the year. In the great silk-producing regions, women and girls also tended silkworms, feeding them mulberry leaves in careful, measured amounts, managing their temperature and humidity, following the worm through its transformation to cocoon, and then processing the delicate fiber in a series of exacting steps. Silk was not for ordinary wear. Ordinary people wore hemp and later cotton, but it was woven for trade, for tribute, for the market, and the labor behind it was entirely female. The loom itself was the size of a piece of furniture, large enough that it occupied its own space in the house or in a covered portion of the courtyard. The sound of it, the rhythmic thump of the shuttle passing through the threads, the creak of the heddle, was the background music of domestic life in ways that are hard to imagine now. It is a sound that would have been constant, woven into the texture of any village at any time of day. Children in these households were not idle. They were not, in the modern sense, allowed to be children for very long. By the age of 6 or 7, a child was expected to contribute, herding the family's small livestock on the paths between fields, gathering firewood, carrying water, watching younger siblings, learning by observation and imitation the tasks that would occupy the rest of their lives. Boys began to follow their fathers into the field. Girls stood at the edge of the kitchen space and watched until they were old enough to be given small tasks, then larger ones, until the morning came, earlier than we would now consider appropriate, when the cooking and the weaving became partly theirs. The market was the other great organizing institution of ordinary life, and it stood at the center of village society the way the well or the local temple did, as a place where the private and the communal intersected, where goods and information and social standing were all simultaneously negotiated. Market days were not daily in most small communities. They occurred at regular intervals, every few days, or on prescribed days in the traditional calendar. And they drew people from several villages, from the surrounding countryside, creating a temporary density of human activity that was unlike any other moment in the week. Farmers brought surplus grain or preserved food. Craftsmen brought their products, pottery, woven goods, simple metal tools, rope, wooden implements. Merchants, a class regarded with some social suspicion in the Confucian hierarchy but entirely necessary in practice, moved goods between communities and regions. At the market, a woman might trade a length of hemp cloth for a measure of salt. A man might sell a portion of his grain surplus and use the coin, and by later periods, actual metal coins were in common circulation, to pay a portion of a tax debt, or to buy a new hoe blade. Children clustered near the food stalls where vendors sold prepared snacks, fried dough, steamed buns if the season was prosperous, small portions of things that were never eaten at home. The market was one of the few places where something like leisure existed for ordinary people, where the transaction of business shaded into the sociability of being among people not your immediate family. It was also where rumors traveled. What had the magistrate's office announced? How was the harvest in the next county? Had the river risen? Was there trouble on the roads to the north? The market was the newspaper, the meeting hall, and the social calendar all at once. And when it was over, when the vendors packed their remaining goods, when the last transactions concluded, when the crowd thinned and the lane emptied, everyone walked home, carrying what they had traded for, returning to their houses and their fields and their looms and their fires, the brief sociability of the market already receding behind them, the long ordinary quiet of the working day settling back into place. The ancestors are still here, ritual, reverence, and the world beneath the living. There is a corner of this house we have not yet fully entered. We have looked at it, noted its shelf and its small clay figure and its faint smell of incense. But we have not stood close enough, quietly enough, to understand what it really meant to the people who lived here. The ancestors were not gone. This is perhaps the most important thing to understand about the inner life of an ordinary household in ancient China. The dead had not departed in any final sense. They had moved from one state of being to another, from the visible to the invisible, from the speaking world to the listening world. But they remained, present, attentive, capable of influence, requiring sustenance, demanding remembrance, expressing displeasure through the misfortunes that fell upon a family that neglected them. The ancestral shrine was the physical address where this invisible world was understood to reside, at least partly. On it were placed the spirit tablets, pieces of wood on which the names and sometimes the dates of deceased family members were written, or, in households where no one could write, perhaps just a small painted or fired clay figure, understood to carry the presence of those who had gone before. Before this shrine, in the course of an ordinary day, someone in the household bowed. Not necessarily in an elaborate ceremony, just a brief, private acknowledgement. You are here. We know you are here. We have not forgotten. Offerings were placed with regularity. Food, primarily, a portion of whatever the household was eating, or a small dish prepared specifically, set before the tablet or figure, allowed to rest for a time while the ancestor ate in their invisible way, then removed and consumed by the family without waste. Incense was burned when it could be afforded. In harder seasons, the incense might be skipped, but the food offering rarely was. To starve the ancestors was to court misfortune more certainly than almost anything else a family could do. The festivals of the year were, in large part, organized around the relationship between the living and the dead. The spring festival, what we might broadly recognize as the ancestor of what is still celebrated as the Lunar New Year, involved the cleaning of graves, the burning of offerings, the gathering of the extended family, the making of special foods, and the general renewal of the compact between the living and their predecessors. The mid-autumn period brought another wave of ritual attention. There were days in the traditional calendar specifically designated as times when the boundary between the living and dead worlds was understood to be thinner, more permeable, when the hungry spirits of those without living descendants wandered, and when even those with families needed extra propitiation. But it was not only the ancestors in the strict family sense who watched and needed attention. The house itself was inhabited by a complex community of smaller deities and spirits. The kitchen god, already mentioned, who noted the behavior of the household through the year and made his annual report. The earth god, the local deity of the ground on which the village stood, with his own small shrine often located at the edge of the settlement or at a crossroads, who protected the land and its productivity and to whom farmers prayed before planting and gave thanks after harvest. The door gods, painted or pasted on the entrance, who kept out harmful spirits and welcomed good fortune. The well deity. The latrine deity, who existed not as a joke but as a genuine supernatural presence in a functional relationship with the family. This was not a world divided cleanly between the material and the spiritual. It was a world in which the supernatural was woven into the fabric of everyday function. When the well ran low, you spoke to its deity. When a child fell ill, you consulted not only any practical remedy you knew but also the invisible dimension of the illness, what obligation had been neglected, what spirit had been accidentally offended, what alignment had gone wrong. The local healer, who was also often the local ritual specialist, occupied a role that combined medicine, spiritual negotiation, and social counsel in ways that were entirely natural to the people who sought them. The agricultural calendar itself was saturated with spiritual meaning. The timing of planting was not only meteorological but cosmological. The great cycle of yin and yang, of female and male, dark and light, cold and warm, contracting and expanding, was the framework within which natural phenomena were understood and within which human action was calibrated. To plant at the right cosmological moment was to align the family's effort with the deeper forces of the world. To ignore those alignments was to risk working against the grain of heaven and earth, quite literally. There was something in all of this that is easy to romanticize from a great distance, and we should be careful not to. For the ordinary person, this relationship with the invisible world was not a comforting or beautiful system. It was a system of obligation and anxiety as much as one of meaning and connection. The ancestors required feeding. The kitchen god required good behavior. The seasonal deities required timely propitiation. Failure to perform these obligations did not result in a vague spiritual disappointment. It resulted, people believed firmly, in illness, bad harvests, floods, accidents, the crying of children at night, and the general unraveling of the fragile stability that a family worked so hard to maintain. To live here was to understand that you were never entirely alone, and that being never alone was not always reassuring. The world was full of entities with their own requirements, and navigating those requirements was part of the daily labor of life, unpaid, unrecorded, ongoing. But there was also, underneath the obligation, something that might be called comfort. The sense that the people who had come before you, who had plowed this same field, carried water from the same river, slept in the same room, were still present in some way. That the grandmother who had taught you to cook was still, in some invisible way, nearby. That the chain of the family stretched backward into a past that gave the present tense some density, some meaning, some weight beyond the mere moment. The shrine in the corner held all of this, quietly, in the small space of a shelf and a clay figure and the fading smell of yesterday's incense. Order in small rooms, family hierarchy, marriage, education, and the weight of duty. If you had asked an ordinary person in ancient China to describe the moral foundation of their daily life, they would not have told you about abstract philosophy. They would have told you about their father. About the proper way to enter a room where an elder was present. About the words you used when addressing someone older than yourself versus someone younger. About the particular weight of the term that might be translated as filial piety, a term that in English sounds formal and distant, but in daily life was immediate and constant, like the pressure of gravity, always present, never quite mentioned, impossible to move through the world without. The Confucian social order, which shaped Chinese civilization deeply and persistently across many centuries, was not experienced by ordinary people as a philosophy. It was experienced as the texture of relationships. The 5 relationships that formed its core, between ruler and subject, between parent and child, between husband and wife, between elder sibling and younger sibling, between friend and friend. Each relationship was asymmetrical in its authority, demanding specific behaviors from the person in the lower position toward the person in the higher. Obedience upward. Care downward. The whole world arranged in a pyramid of mutual obligation. In the household, this meant specific things, visible in the way a room was arranged and the way bodies moved through it. A son did not sit in his father's presence without being invited to. He did not speak before his father had spoken when there was anything of significance to be said. He did not begin eating before his father, or leave the table before his father, or make significant decisions about labor, about money, about his future, without the father's knowledge and consent. These were not merely manners. They were the lived enactment of a social principle that bound the family together, that gave the old authority over the young, the senior authority over the junior, the male authority over the female. The position of women in this world was complex and is worth sitting with carefully. In the formal Confucian framework, a woman's life was shaped by three obediences: to her father before marriage, to her husband after marriage, to her son in widowhood. This is a stark summary of a relationship of subordination that was real and that constrained women's lives in measurable ways. Women did not hold office. They did not sit for the state examinations. Their names did not appear in official records except occasionally as the mothers or wives of men. The concept of female virtue was centered on qualities of obedience, industry, modesty, and self-effacement. And yet, the reality of women's lives was considerably more dimensional than the formal framework suggests. Within the domestic sphere, which was not a minor sphere, a woman's authority could be considerable. The management of the household economy, the decisions about food storage and expenditure, the allocation of domestic labor, the rearing and education of children, the maintenance of relationships with neighbors and kin, these were primarily female domains, and a capable woman who managed them well was not invisible or powerless. She was known. Her reputation for industry and good management was the reputation of the household. Her authority over her daughters-in-law could be absolute, and the mother-in-law occupied a position in the domestic hierarchy that was both powerful and sometimes, from the perspective of young women entering the household, difficult to endure. Marriage itself was arranged. It was not a romantic choice but a social and economic transaction between families, negotiated by parents or by matchmakers whose professional role it was to align families of compatible standing. A girl might meet her husband for the first time on their wedding day, or perhaps once briefly beforehand. The criteria for a good match were stability, reputation, the compatibility of astrological signs, the adequacy of the bride price and dowry, and the agricultural or craft capacities of the household she was entering. Love was not irrelevant, it was hoped for, and when it developed between a married couple it was valued, but it was not the premise. The premise was continuity, the continuation of the family line, the production of sons to carry on the ancestral rights and provide labor for the aging parents. Sons were preferred with a directness that requires no softening. A daughter was a temporary member of the household. She would leave upon marriage, joining another family's line, her labor and her future children becoming theirs. A son stayed, and when he married, his wife came to the household, adding labor and the possibility of children who would inherit the family's name, fields, and obligations. The birth of a son was cause for genuine celebration. The birth of a daughter was not cause for celebration of equal magnitude, and in times of extreme poverty or hardship, female infanticide, while not universal or uniform, was a practice that occurred, and that speaks to the pressure families were under in the worst seasons. Education, in the formal sense, was largely inaccessible to ordinary families. The great imperial examination system, which offered, in theory, the possibility of social advancement through demonstrated learning, was not a real option for the son of a subsistence farmer. The examinations required years of study, access to texts, the ability to afford not to work in the fields, none of which was available to most families. The educated class was largely self-perpetuating, their children having the time and resources to study that the children of farmers did not. And yet basic literacy was not entirely absent from village life. Some boys, in some families, in some periods, learned to recognize the characters most necessary for daily life, the characters on market signs, on contracts, on official notices posted at the edge of the village. A local teacher, sometimes a failed examination candidate living on the margins of the local educated class, might run a small school attended by a handful of boys whose families could spare them from field work for a portion of the year. The education was rudimentary, copying characters, memorizing short texts, but it represented, for those who could access it, a narrow window into a world of written communication that was otherwise entirely closed to them. For the vast majority, the relationship with official power was experienced not through literacy or law but through the intermediary of the local magistrate, the government official who collected taxes, adjudicated disputes, administered punishments, and generally represented the imperial state in the village world. The magistrate was typically from the educated class, educated through the examination system, and assigned to a region deliberately far from his own home to prevent him from favoring his own family. He was, for most ordinary people, a distant and somewhat alarming figure, the point at which the enormous weight of the imperial system descended into local life, demanding grain, demanding labor, demanding compliance. Duty was not an empty word in this world. It was the air that the social order breathed. And even those for whom it was most constraining, the young woman entering a stranger's household, the farmer who bowed to his landlord, the son who sacrificed his own preferences to his father's authority, even they had largely internalized its necessity. Because the alternative was not understood as freedom. The alternative was disorder. And in a world this precarious, disorder was not an abstraction. It was the flood that destroyed the harvest. It was the bandit on the road. It was the fever that took the child. Order, even the order of hierarchy, even the order of submission, felt like the opposite of those things. The weight of the world, taxes, scarcity, flood, and the fragility of order. There is a kind of tiredness that lives in the body differently from ordinary fatigue. It is not the tiredness of a single long day in the field, the kind that yields readily to sleep and is gone by morning. It is the tiredness of years, of seasons repeating into seasons without adequate rest between them, of a body used hard since childhood, in weather that did not accommodate itself to human needs, of a mind that has calculated and recalculated the grain jar many times and knows how close the margin is. Most ordinary people in ancient China lived on or near this margin. Not always in active crisis, but never far from the possibility of one. The tax system was the most immediate and unavoidable expression of the larger world pressing down on a small family. In various forms across the long history of Chinese civilization, ordinary farming families owed a portion of their agricultural produce to the state. This grain tax was the financial foundation of imperial government. It funded the armies, the bureaucracy, the great construction projects, the court. It was non-negotiable, assessed by officials who visited periodically to estimate the yield of a family's land, and collected with the kind of impersonal thoroughness that makes bureaucracy so much heavier than individual cruelty. But the grain tax was often only the beginning. Beyond it, in many periods, there were additional levies, labor obligations, the corvée system by which ordinary men could be conscripted into state service for weeks or months at a time, to build walls, dig canals, repair roads, construct official buildings, without compensation beyond a basic ration. A family that lost its male labor to corvée service during the critical window of planting or harvest faced a year of reckoning that no amount of good intentions could resolve. And there were households where the man never returned from his labor obligation at all, drafted into military service, or lost to illness, or simply absorbed into the great machine of state and not released. Landlord relationships added another layer of pressure. Not all farming families owned their land. Tenancy was common, particularly in prosperous agricultural regions where land had consolidated into the hands of those with enough wealth and literacy to hold official title to it. A tenant farmer paid a portion of his crop as rent, often a significant portion, and had no security of tenure that the landlord was obligated to honor indefinitely. The difference between a family that owned its small plot, however marginal, and a family that worked someone else's land was the difference between fragility and precarity. And then there were the things that no human institution could be blamed for, but that arrived with the same destructive force regardless. The Yellow River. The great rivers of China, the Yellow in the north, the Yangtze in the south and center, were the sources of the agricultural abundance that made civilization possible. They were also, periodically, the sources of catastrophe of a scale that is difficult to fully imagine. When the Yellow River flooded, it did not merely overflow its banks. It changed course. It moved across a landscape like a slow erasure, covering fields, destroying villages, killing livestock, driving families from land that had been their families for generations, introducing disease into the standing water left behind. The historical record of Chinese civilization is, in one reading, a long negotiation with this river, constant works of embankment and canal, constant corvée labor invested in holding back the water, and periodic catastrophic failures when all of that effort gave way. Drought was the opposite pressure, equally capable of devastation. A summer without adequate rain was a summer whose harvest would be reduced. 2 such summers in sequence meant the grain jar would not last. 3 meant famine. Famine was not an extreme event in the lives of ancient Chinese communities. It was a recurring one. Historians have documented periods of recurring subsistence crisis across Chinese agricultural history, intervals when the combination of drought, flood, tax burden, and locust swarms aligned to produce failures of the food supply that moved through peasant communities with terrible speed. How a family survived a famine year, if they survived, depended on their stored reserves, their access to credit or kin networks, their ability to forage, their willingness to eat things they would not ordinarily eat, and ultimately on whether the calamity lasted 1 year or 2 or 3. Illness was the constant companion of ordinary life, and medicine, as most common people could access it, was a combination of folk knowledge, herbal treatment, ritual intervention, and luck. Infant and child mortality was high. A family with 6 children born expected to raise perhaps 3 or 4 to adulthood, and this expectation was absorbed into the emotional culture of child-rearing in ways that are hard to articulate, a certain held-back quality to attachment in infancy, perhaps, or simply the normalized presence of loss in the texture of daily life. People died at ages that now seem impossibly young from conditions that now seem impossibly basic: infected wounds, waterborne illness, respiratory disease, complications of childbirth that a simple intervention could now prevent. The experience of poverty, not the poverty of the destitute who had lost everything, but the low-level, structural poverty of ordinary subsistence farming was not experienced as a catastrophe. It was experienced as the ground condition of life, the water in which ordinary people swam. There were good years and bad years. Good years did not transform the fundamental situation. They allowed for small accumulations, a slightly fuller grain jar, a new tool, a festival that was celebrated with more food than usual. That were the entire range of material prosperity available to most ordinary families. And yet people did not simply endure this in silence and isolation. The village was a network, and the network was the safety net. Neighbors shared labor during planting and harvest. Extended families pooled resources when one branch was in crisis. The local temple was not only a spiritual site but a community institution that organized communal responses to shared difficulties. Kin relationships, the complex web of cousin and uncle and affinal connection that extended a family outward into the wider community, created channels through which emergency aid, borrowed grain, labor assistance, and social support moved. The people of these villages were not passive recipients of whatever the world threw at them. They were resourceful, organized at the community level, skilled in the management of scarcity, and possessed of a resilience that is visible in the simple fact that the villages persisted, across flood and drought and tax and illness, generation after generation, century after century. But let us not make the resilience into something too heroic, either. Sometimes it failed. Sometimes families lost their land. Sometimes people left, abandoned the village for the city, joined a migrant labor force, sold themselves into servitude, disappeared into the vast unnamed margins of Chinese history where the records no longer follow them. The order of society absorbed most of its ordinary people. It did not absorb all of them cleanly. The grain jar is nearly empty. The sky has been cloudless for 6 weeks. The tax collector came last month and took what was owed. What remains is an arithmetic of what the family needs to last until the next harvest, and it does not quite work out. This was not unusual. This was, at various points, the situation of millions. From cradle to grave, the arc of an ordinary life. A child is born in the inner room of the house, in the darkness and close warmth, attended by the older women of the household and perhaps a local midwife whose knowledge of birth was entirely practical, accumulated through experience rather than any formal training, passed from woman to woman across generations. The sounds of this birth move through the thin walls of the house. Outside, in the courtyard, a man waits. The older children, if there are older children, have been moved to a neighbor's house for the night. When the cry comes, the name of the child is not yet decided. Names in this world were chosen carefully, sometimes with the help of a specialist who could read the astrological alignment of the birth and suggest characters whose meaning and tone would harmonize favorably with the family's circumstances. A child might go by a milk name, a soft, informal name used within the family, for years before a more formal name was settled upon. The giving of a name was an act of integration, of inscription into the family and its lineage. A baby was held close, fed, bound in cloth wrapping that kept the limbs warm and the body contained. In colder regions, the infant spent much of its first months essentially attached to an adult body, wrapped into a carrying cloth across the back or chest, moving through the ordinary work of the day with the caretaker. the warmth was not merely physical comfort. In an environment where temperature, exposure, and illness could kill a small body with terrible swiftness, staying warm was survival. Childhood proceeded quickly toward usefulness. The sweetness of early years, and it existed, these families were not without tenderness, gave way to expectation by the time the child was old enough to be of reliable help. By 6 or 7, the work had begun. Not the hardest work, but work. Watching animals. Running errands. Learning the forms of household tasks by observation and imitation. The world outside the house was already familiar: the lane, the field's edge, the well, the market on its rotating days, but now it became a working world, not merely a landscape of play. For a boy, the shaping influence was his father. He followed, learned, watched. How to hold a hoe. How to read the soil. How to time the irrigation. How to negotiate respectfully at the market. How to bow appropriately to the village elder. How to carry the weight of obligation without showing that it was heavy. A boy grew into these things not through formal instruction but through proximity, through years of being beside the men who carried the family forward. For a girl, the mother was the world. Kitchen, loom, garden, child care, these were the spaces of female learning, and a girl learned them completely. She also learned the subtler things: how to manage the competing demands of a multi-generational household, how to navigate the complex authority of a mother-in-law, how to maintain good standing with neighbors, how to grieve without alarming the household, how to work through illness and exhaustion and difficult seasons without complaint. Marriage was the great reorganization of a young person's life, and it came early by modern standards, late adolescence or early adulthood for both sexes, though girls were sometimes married very young, and the full weight of the transition was heavier for women than for men. A young man who married brought his wife into his existing household, into a space he already knew, among people he already understood. A young woman left her natal home entirely, crossing into a household of strangers where she was, for at least the first years, at the bottom of a new hierarchy. The adjustment required was enormous, and the loneliness of it, the homesickness, the loss of everything familiar, was understood as simply part of what it was to be a woman, and was not generally treated as requiring consolation. Over years, if she was fortunate, she found her footing in the new household. She bore children, preferably sons, and with the arrival of children her position solidified. She became, gradually, less the outsider and more the central domestic manager. When her own sons married and brought their wives in, she became the mother-in-law, and the cycle completed itself in her person, the one who had once been at the bottom of the hierarchy ascending now to its domestic summit. Old age was not exile or abandonment. It was, ideally, and in many actual cases, the fulfillment of the social compact. The filial duty of children to parents meant that parents in old age were supported, housed, fed, and cared for by their adult children. The elderly father sat in the warmest seat. The elderly mother was given the lighter work or excused from work entirely if she was frail. Their opinions were consulted, their preferences respected, their bodily needs attended to. The Confucian principle here was not merely moral but practical. A parent who had worked every day of their life in service of the family had earned its care. Death was handled with ceremony proportional to the family's means, and the means of ordinary families were modest. The body was washed and dressed by the family, not by strangers. The mourning period was observed with specific practices: the wearing of unbleached cloth, the abstention from meat and festivity, the ritual weeping and the offerings at the shrine. A coffin, even a simple one, represented a significant expenditure for a poor family, and the desire to provide proper burial was so strong that many families in difficult circumstances went into debt to do it. Because to bury a family member without proper rites was to risk their becoming one of the wandering hungry dead, unattached to a family, unprovided for, a source of the very kind of spiritual disturbance that ritual was designed to prevent. And then, after the mourning period, the deceased took their place at the shrine. The chain of obligation extended one generation further back. The family continued. There was a class difference even within the ordinary world that deserves acknowledgement. The farming family we have been following was not the lowest stratum of society. Below the farming family was the landless laborer, working for wages or in exchange for food and housing on someone else's land. Below that, in various periods, were those in servitude, personal bondage to a household, their labor not their own. Above the farming family were the artisan families of the market towns, the potter, the blacksmith, the carpenter, the boatman on the river, who owned neither land nor the insecurity that came with it, but whose lives held a different kind of dignity and a somewhat wider social world. In the towns that grew at the intersection of roads and rivers, there were merchants, petty officials, minor scholars, and the beginnings of what might be called an urban working class, people who did not farm but who were entirely dependent on the agricultural surplus of the surrounding countryside, the grain that flowed in from the villages to feed the people who made and sold and administered and moved things. Their daily lives had different textures: narrower rooms, street noise rather than field silence, the social density of urban proximity, but the fundamental rhythms of family, hierarchy, food, ritual, and precariousness were recognizably the same. This was ordinary life, in all its gradations. It was not a single type but a range of situations bound together by the same organizing values and the same fundamental uncertainties. From the first cry in the inner room to the last arrangements at the shrine, every life moved through the same landscape, different in its particulars, continuous in its essential shape. Millions of ordinary mornings, what it meant to be a common person in ancient China. Step back now. Not far. Just enough to see more than one house at once. From a small rise above the village, in the blue light of late afternoon, you can see perhaps 20 or 30 rooftops, the curve of gray tile on the larger houses near the center, the rougher thatch toward the edges. Smoke from several of them, the evening meal beginning. A dog moving along the lane between two walls. The distant sound of a child being called home. The particular hush that falls on a farming community at this hour, when the day's heaviest labor is done and the evening's smaller tasks have not yet fully begun. And then, in your imagination, let the view expand. Let the village become one of many, one of the hundreds of thousands of small communities that were scattered, like seeds across an immense plain, across the river valleys and mountain foothills and coastal lowlands of what we now call China. Each one of them, at this same hour, producing the same smoke, the same sounds, the same smells. Each one containing the same arguments and silences and moments of tenderness. Each one organized around the same grain jar, the same ancestral shrine, the same relationship to the same sky. How many people are we talking about? The population estimates across ancient Chinese history range widely and are debated, but what is certain is that at virtually every period, this was one of the most densely populated regions of the inhabited world. During some of the great classical periods, the population of China may have been larger than that of the entire Roman Empire at its height. Tens of millions of people, living exactly these lives, cooking the same millet, weaving the same cloth, bowing to the same elders, carrying the same water, worrying about the same harvest. That number, tens of millions, can slide past the mind without landing properly. So let us hold it differently. Let us say, behind every chapter of Chinese history that gets told in the textbooks, behind every dynasty, every philosophical school, every great construction project, every scroll of poetry, every military campaign, behind every single thing that history chose to record, there were millions of people whose lives we have been exploring tonight. People whose names were not written down, whose daily thoughts were not preserved, who built the walls and dug the canals and paid the grain and produced the silk and kept the whole vast structure fed and functioning, without which none of the recorded history would have had anything to stand on. The great philosophical traditions of ancient China, the careful reasoning about the nature of proper social order, the debates about virtue and governance, the accumulated wisdom about heaven and earth and the proper conduct of human life, were produced almost entirely by members of the literate and official classes. They wrote about ordinary people more often than they wrote for them. And they did not always write about them kindly. The farmers were noble in abstract principle, their labor was the foundation of everything, and the Confucian hierarchy explicitly ranked them above artisans and merchants in the social order, but in practice, the officials who taxed them and drafted them and administered their lives regarded them from an enormous social and cultural distance. And yet the ordinary people had their own culture, complete and sustaining. The festivals, the rituals, the songs, the stories told in the evenings, these were not the culture of the scholars. They were something older, more local, more tied to the specific feel of this river, this planting season, this village's particular history. Stories about local spirits. Songs about the labor of the field, shaped by the rhythm of the work itself. Festivals that predated any philosophical system and that continued to be observed long after those systems had changed. There was a continuity here that is remarkable. The fundamental shape of ordinary daily life in rural China, the multi-generational household, the ancestral shrine, the seasonal agricultural rhythm, the village market, the Confucian family hierarchy, the reverence for the dead, the anxiety about the harvest, persisted with remarkable stability across an enormous span of time. Dynasties rose and fell. Borders shifted. Technology slowly changed. But the life of the village, at its core, reproduced itself across centuries with a fidelity that speaks to how deeply these patterns had become embedded in the way people understood what a life was supposed to look like. This is not to say that ordinary people were unchanging or passive. Peasant rebellions, moments when the pressure of taxation and famine and official cruelty became intolerable and ordinary people collectively refused their assigned role, were one of the great recurring features of Chinese history. The end of many dynasties was precipitated not by foreign invasion or internal intrigue but by the cumulative uprising of people who had reached the limit of what they could endure. The ordinary person was, in extremity, capable of becoming history rather than merely being the ground on which history stood. But most of the time, across most seasons of most years, the ordinary person was not making history. They were making breakfast. They were carrying water. They were tending the fire. They were checking the grain jar. They were bowing to the ancestor at the dawn of a new day, and going out into the field, and hoping that the weather would hold, and coming home at dusk with the deep tiredness of honest labor, and settling into the familiar sounds and smells of the house, and sleeping. That is what it was to be most people, in most places, in most times, inside the long history of Chinese civilization. It was not a small or empty life. It was a full life, full of duty and difficulty and precariousness and ritual and tenderness and boredom and grief and the quiet pleasures that only appear when you are paying close attention to small things. The smell of cooked grain in a cold room. The sound of a child learning to laugh. The particular satisfaction of a well-made thing, a pot that doesn't crack, a cloth that turns out even, a harvest that comes in ahead of the rain. The scale of Chinese civilization was built on these lives. And these lives were, in their ordinary fullness, equal to the scale. The last light, night falls on the ordinary world. It is evening now. In the house at the edge of the field, the day is settling. The cooking fire has been fed its last fuel of the day, and the meal has been eaten, quietly, in the dim light, the family around the low table, the bowls lifted and set down, the sound of eating and the small sounds of a family at rest after its work. The older man has already moved toward the warmest corner of the room. The children, heavy with the tiredness that only full young bodies carry, are already half asleep. The woman of the house moves through the last tasks of the evening with the efficiency of total familiarity. The bowls rinsed and stacked. The remaining grain measured and returned to the jar. The fire banked carefully, not extinguished but reduced, protected beneath a covering of ash so that it will still be alive, just barely, in the darkness before dawn, ready to be coaxed back when the next day begins. This is a skill that takes practice. You can lose the fire. And losing the fire means beginning the morning from cold, which is harder in every way. She sets a small portion of the evening's meal before the ancestral shrine. Murmurs something low and private, in the direction of the tablet and the clay figure. Then she settles. The room is dark now, except for the faint orange pulse of the banked fire through the grate of the clay stove. Outside, through the thin walls, the sounds of the village at night, a dog somewhere, a conversation in the lane fading as whoever was walking passes and moves on, the distant sound of a tree moving in the wind that has picked up from the northeast, the wind that brings cooler air before dawn. Inside the house, breathing. The particular sound of several people sleeping in one room, not unpleasant. Something almost like music in the layered depth of it, the deep slow breath of the old men, the lighter breathing of the children, the brief shift and settle of bodies finding their positions for the night. The smell of the room is the smell of this family, grain, smoke, cloth, skin, the faint sweetness of incense already hours gone. This is how ancient China ended each day. Not with ceremony. Not with any sense of its own significance. Just this, people sleeping in a room, safe for this one night, the fire still breathing, the ancestors present in their corner, the next day's labor not yet arrived. We have been here for some time now, in this world. We have walked its lanes and sat in its kitchens and watched its fields in every season and attended its rituals and felt, as much as any distance of time allows, something of what it was to live here. And now that we are at the end of the evening, it seems right to simply be quiet with what we have found. Because what we have found is not extraordinary. It is, in the most literal sense, ordinary. And ordinariness, looked at closely enough, becomes something else. It becomes the record of what human life actually was, not the version that got written down by those with brushes and silk and the leisure to think about posterity, but the version that was actually lived, day after day, in these houses, on these fields, alongside these rivers, in these bodies. Think of what was sustained, in this ordinary world, across its enormous span of time. The family, not the nuclear family of 2 adults and children that modern people know, but the extended, multi-generational family as the primary unit of survival and belonging. The cultivation of land that fed one of the largest populations the ancient world ever contained. The production of textiles that clothed them all. The construction and maintenance of the water systems, the canals, the embankments, the irrigation channels that made agriculture possible at the scale it occurred. The preservation, across centuries of political change and ecological catastrophe, of a civilization's continuity. Ordinary people did all of this. They did it without recognition. They did it for the grain jar and the family shrine and the children sleeping in the next room. They did it because it was what there was to do, and because they were part of a chain that extended behind them into a past they could only partially reconstruct and forward into a future they could not see. There is something worth sitting with here, in the darkness, in the quiet of this late hour. The people whose lives we have been following tonight, this farmer with his worn-down hoe, this woman at her loom, this old man in the corner of the warmest room, this child falling asleep with the day's tiredness still in her hands, they did not think of themselves as remarkable. They thought of themselves as people doing what people were supposed to do. Honoring the ancestors. Feeding the family. Working the land. Following the season. Carrying the obligation of the present moment toward a future they hoped would be slightly better, or at least not worse. And in that unassuming constancy, there is something that time has not entirely erased. We look back across the distance of centuries and we can still see, in the shape of those lives, something recognizable. The love for children. The exhaustion of labor. The comfort of a warm fire at the end of a long day. The particular importance of small things when the large things are beyond your control. The way a family can feel complete in one room, in the dark, breathing together, the fire just barely alive. These are not exotic things. They are not things that belong to one civilization or one era. They are things that belong to being human, in any time and any place. And ancient China, for all its elaborate hierarchies and its complex cosmologies and its great philosophical systems, was, at its base, in its villages, in its households, a civilization of human beings doing human things. The fire is very low now. Through the oiled paper of the window, the faintest blue of deepest night, somewhere between midnight and the first bird. The whole household is still. The whole village is still. Out beyond the village, the fields lie quiet under the dark, the soil still holding the warmth of yesterday's sun, already releasing it back upward into the cold air, the slow breathing of the earth. And further out, past this village, across the valley and the next valley and the mountains beyond those, across the Great Plains and the river systems and the coast and the interior, 10,000 other villages with 10,000 other banked fires and 10,000 other ancestral shrines in their corners and 10,000 other grain jars whose contents have been worried over and conserved and consumed and refilled across a span of time so long that it bends back towards something like infinity. All of them have eaten their evening meal. All of them have spoken their quiet words to the ancestors. All of them have checked the door against the cold. All of them have settled into sleep. This is the world we have been visiting tonight. This is what it felt like to be an ordinary person inside a civilization that history remembers for its grandeur and its depth, but whose true foundation was always this: a family in a small house, a fire holding through the night, the sound of breathing in a dark room. Let it be quiet now. Let the night settle over the valley, over the fields and the lane and the courtyard and the rooftops, the smoke from 30 chimneys thinning upward into the cold and becoming invisible against the dark sky. The rooster will not speak for hours yet. There is time, still, to rest. If you have stayed with us through this long evening, through the fields and the kitchens and the rituals and the quiet weight of ordinary lives, thank you for being here. If these slow journeys into the human past are something you value, you are always welcome at Science All Station. The stories will continue here, told unhurriedly, in the dark, for anyone who wishes to listen. Rest now. The village is sleeping. Ancient China is sleeping. The ancestors are still, and the fire is almost out, and the earth is turning slowly beneath it all, as it always has, carrying its ordinary lives forward into the next morning, and the morning after that, and all the mornings to come.